My name is Randy Crum, and I'm an infographics and data visualization designer, and I'm the coordinator, and I kind of created these global DataViz meetups. But I run my own DataViz company called InfoNewt, and we design data visualizations and presentations and reports, and of course infographics for clients all over the world. I wrote the book called Cool Infographics, and I run a website at coolinfographics.com. I'm also the organizer for not only the global meetups, but for the meetups here in Dallas, in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, as well as in Austin, in Texas. And I also teach a course. I'll show you real quick. I teach a course of data visualization and storytelling here at SMU. It's an online course that you can take from everywhere. You don't have to be in the Dallas area, but it's a 12-week certificate program. And my next course is going to start next week. But I teach it twice a year, so once in the spring and once in the fall. And so that's what I do. If you have any interest in that, you can always ask me questions or send me an email or find more information there at the URL smu.edu/dataviz. I mentioned that this is a global DataViz meetup. And so when the pandemic hit, we all went to either not having events or having online events. And once we were having online events, it was like, okay, well, why not share those with meetup groups all over the place that are looking for content and speakers that they can share with their local DataViz communities. And so we keep getting more and more groups to participate, and we're up to 20 groups now that are participating and helping not only to promote and share the events that we're talking about, but any group can be the host and have a speaker. And so we've had a number of different groups that had a speaker and were the host group for one of these global DataViz events. And so I hope to keep this going, either totally online or as we move to maybe hybrid type events. But if you have some ideas of maybe a good speaker or a good event, or even just some feedback, I would love to hear it. You can send a note through Meetup, or I'll put my email in the chat window later when I'm done here. When we have in-person meetup events, we're really good about trying to make employment a shareable thing for our local DataViz communities. So if anybody is hiring or if anybody is looking for a job, when we have in-person events, it's really easy to network and stuff like that. It's much harder when we're doing these online events. So I would encourage you, if you're in either of those roles, whether you are hiring or if you are looking for a role, to use your local DataViz community. On the Meetup website, there is a discussion board that you can post to below where the events are, and sometimes people don't scroll low enough to see that. But you can reach your local community even if events aren't going on, and use Meetup as your tool to network with people in your local area. You're welcome to use the Zoom chat here if you want to share any information like a LinkedIn profile, like Robert just did. That's fantastic. It's a little bit harder here in the online community. Ray and I are going to share our LinkedIn profile links as well, but feel free to. But you should use that. I will mention that on my website on coolinfographics.com, I also maintain a data visualization jobs board. And so for both ends of that, so it's free to post a job. So if you are at a company that is hiring, send me a link and I will put it on the jobs board, and these jobs get sent out in my weekly newsletter as well. And also, if you're looking, it's a good place to sort of keep an eye on where these DataViz jobs are popping up, and they've been popping up fast. I've had, 3 or 4 new ones every week for the last couple weeks. A lot of them are remote. A lot of them are now starting to show up on location again, but they're all there on the jobs board. So you're welcome to use that as a resource. The last thing I want to do from a housekeeping standpoint is I do need to thank Food Truck. Food Truck is helping sponsor our event and helping pay for the Zoom webinar fees and stuff like that. And I'm going to imagine that most everybody here is not familiar with Food Truck. So Food Truck is a pretty new website, and what they're trying to do is syndicate charts and data visualizations. And the idea is they are looking for 2 things. One, designers, which is probably the biggest opportunity for people here in the event. They're looking for people to post data visualizations and charts on Food Truck that then can be shared to other websites, and that designer would then get credit whenever somebody shares that chart or that data visualization. And it's a good way for for up and coming designers or even established designers to get a lot of their work out there and published. But if you're running a website, it's also a great place to go get a chart if they're mostly financial charts, but to get a chart on any topic that you're looking for and be able to grab that chart and have rights to post it on your own website. So they're getting started. They're looking for designers. They're looking for new charts to be able to add and post, and they're helping us out. So big thanks to foodtruck.ai. And if you have any interest either way, go visit their website. And they're doing some fantastic stuff over there. And yes, it's brought to you by Salt. This is their first product coming out of the Salt. Thank you, Sean. All right, so let me introduce Ray. Ray, if you would join me. Ray and I have known each other and have off and on worked together for more than 10 years now. Do you know that, Ray? It's been that long?
Yeah, it doesn't seem it, but yeah. Okay.
Now I'm going to stop sharing this.
So I was
looking. So Ray,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was looking at the chat, and there's just people from all the way from New Zealand to Vancouver to Florida and DC, and I'm just so honored, that you showed up. So, yeah.
It's fantastic. One last housekeeping thing. Ray has given me permission to record this. You'll notice the webinar is being recorded. And so I will put the video up in our normal YouTube playlist and then share it to all the meetup groups. So it's in all the comments in the meetup group so people can get to the recording after the fact. So that's usually a popular question is, are you recording it? I am. And Ray, were you going to share your slides also? Are we going to do that?
Yes, I will. I will do that after the event.
So we'll find a place to put the PDF and make a link to those as well.
Yeah, will do.
So I know you've got some intro stuff in here, so I'm going to let you start, and then I will jump in as people add questions if need be. Please use the Q&A. Again, use the Q&A to post questions at any time. I will jump in if it's very topic and relevant to whatever he's talking about, or we'll save a bunch of them for the end. So, Ray, it is all yours.
Okay, thank you. So I just thought I'd put this up there again. If somebody has a question along the way, we'll pause a bit, we'll slow down, and I'll get on with it. And so, Siri, what is data visualization?
Funny you ask, Ray. Data is statistics, metrics, and all that is measurable in the world. Visualization is the representation of information, data, or knowledge.
Thank you, Siri.
And by the way, Ray, data is the new oil.
Who says data visualization can't be fun, So just to lighten it up a little bit. But anyway, so despite surging oil prices, data visualization is pretty hot these days. Seems like it's the new oil. Just want to give you an intro to what I'll be covering. Informational graphics to me has been part of an ecosystem with journalism and analytics. So design, journalism, and analytics. And when those come together, they start to, really make a more profound statement. I also want to just reference, this is where I work is the conference board. I'll get to in a minute. But there was a woman, Paulette Linden, we believe it's pronounced Linden, and she worked at the conference board back in the 30s up until I think the mid 60s. And she was a really profound chart information designer. And as it turns out, it's a gentleman, Jason Forrest, at McKinsey, who is part of the Data Visualization Society, which I encourage everybody to, at least visit, become a member. And Jason is referencing back to Paulette's work, and I think potentially a book. And Nightingale, he just launched recently, and please visit that site. It's just terrific. It's part of the Data Visualization Society and the journal for just incredible graphics, really. So to get on with it, give you a little bit of my background. I started at USA Today long time ago, and I used to do those front page informational graphics, and did that for a few years, and was down in DC actually, where the headquarters were at the time. And from there, it led me to Business Week magazine. DC was so hot and humid, I couldn't take it. So I came back up to New York, and as it turned out, I ended up working a very long career at Business Week magazine, and got involved with Business Week TV, businessweek.com, everything, and did everything from covers to informational design, and worked there for a good long time until this gentleman bought it, and that's Michael Bloomberg. And basically, he just changed the name, and the content remains the same today, which is just terrific. It's just a really well-rounded magazine. Doesn't lean too far left, not too far right. It's just very centered. Covers everything from science to economics, of course. Anyway, it was a great career there. From there, I went on to MasterCard, and I have some work that I can reference on the way through this presentation that came from there. And now I work for the Conference Board, and they are a bipartisan economic think tank. And they created the labor laws. They brought companies together back in the 20s, I believe, been around for 106 years, I think. And they created all the labor laws that we have today. And we do the Consumer Confidence Index, indices, the economic indicators. Those are products that we own. And also the Center for Economic Development, which is an offshoot of the White House, created by Dwight Eisenhower back, I believe, after World War II, and created what is now we know as the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe and Asia after World War II. And now we're working on, not me, but people I work with are working on a Marshall Plan for small business after COVID. So you've probably heard that term in the past couple of years, and it comes back to us. So I've got lots of work that I can reference from here. And on the side, I've also, during COVID, I worked with the CDC on work that I can't really show, but it was on information design and how to tell visual stories with data. And I also worked with the UN along with Kaiser Phone in both of these scenarios. I work with Kaiser and do workshops for both. So it keeps things interesting, a little something I do on the side. I'm, really like public policy and I've created classes, a class at Columbia University, data visualization, and then also at NYU, where I teach now. I'll reference that, and I think Randy's going to put something into the chat later on in regard to my class, but I've been teaching there for I think 9 years now straight, and it's called Data Visualization for Business, and I teach every semester, and I just kicked off a class this week. So if you're interested, reach out to me, please connect on LinkedIn. We'll put that information up shortly. I also created and taught at Yeshiva right up until the pandemic here in New York City, and taught a friend of mine's class at Parsons. And his name is Silvio Da Silva, another very well-known information designer and a very good friend. And I want to say hello to Naomi Robbins, who I saw in the chat was out there. So thank you for coming. So I consider myself a visual narrator, as I think all of us do. And it's really nothing new. People have been doing this for, ever since, caveman. We've been recording and taking the information that they had at the time, and they recorded it in some way. And still going back to even the great masters. And I should tell you, I'm a illustrator by trade. So that leads me to use that sort of science in what I do, which is mainly in the world of economics. Doesn't seem like they're related, but they are. So, the great masters figured out the science of controlling eyeballs, which is what, I'm tasked to do every day, is to really hold and control your eyeball, and whether it be in social media or in a report. Here is President Taft, just kidding, George Washington, crossing the Delaware. But look at the tension built into this. This was intentional. This is not, something that just sort of happened. These painters, way back when, a couple hundred years ago, figured out this science, and they all built on one another, as we have from, artists that come before us. So one of the things I'd like to focus in on is, I'd like to point out, I should say, is who the audience is, who we're doing it for. Because really, over the years, I've done stuff for, science and health and economics, and it doesn't really matter where it comes from. I think that, if you can figure out who the audience is, it's going to be really, really important. I have this trifecta that I use. And if I understand the information, what the message is, and who the audience is, I can pretty much solve it. Took me a long time to get this system down, but we have to be quick-footed. So, there's your world, our world at work, right? People that are home are real busy. They got kids, they got laundry, everything they do. There's our world at work, and then there's the rest of the world. So you just have to identify early on, before you get into this information game, who the end product is for. Of course.
Ray,
Yes, sir.
a quick question while you're on that.
Yeah.
What is it you want to know about the audience? When you say who are they?
Good question.
What is it you're trying to learn about them?
I want to know the demographics. Is it somebody in college? Is it a 20-something? Is it a millennial? Is it people with kids? Are they deep into their career? Are they retirees? You got to know a little bit about who that audience is before you start putting together pictures, journalism, and analytics. And so, does that answer? That's pretty much my.
Like sort of how does that shape, how you design the data that's going to feed them?
Well, I want to know the demographics, because I specialize in designing metrics. And the more that I know about that, whoever's going to be reading a report, I will tailor it to them with visual language. And there's going to be certain things that an economic audience will know. I mean, right down to the really very, very basic things. Like you have to spell things out for people, right? You can never take anybody for granted. People are smart, you know, your audience is smart, but you can't take them for granted, and you have to know a little bit so that, you know, before you start using like abbreviations, right down to literally that. Abbreviations to what kind of visual language you want to understand. Is it for a different country? Is it for Asia? Because, you know, there's certain visual things that we can use that will embrace other cultures. So I often think of what I did at Business Week magazine it was the best education in the world. And I learned really, really about geopolitics. And, you know, I did the cover for Business Week China and in Romania. And so, you know, really helpful, because I remember one of the covers I did for Business Week magazine was for maybe Business Week Vietnam. And I used a pagoda. And, you know, there's things, right? The world around us. But also, you know, you want to be politically smart in who you're speaking to.
On my poll from the Q&A, Eliza asks, how do you tailor your visuals to the audience based on the demographics, which I think is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But she also asked, do you do any user research to figure that out also?
I don't.
Have your clients, have the companies or the clients done some?
I rely on the people that I'm working with. For example, researchers that are in Brussels or in Kuwait. And so I've had, you know, already a career, you know, in this and in Business Week and Bloomberg and USA Today, and sort of know how to speak to those different regions. Does that answer the question? I hope. You know, so I try to find out as much about them, but I rely on the people around me. Economists, I've worked with a lot of economists over the years, and they have taught me, you know, I mean, they really burned into my brain, you know, the understanding of what they're trying to describe. Journalists, top journalists, really, you know, that work everywhere from the Washington Post to Le Monde, I think in Paris, to, you know, London. And so these folks are really good. But I have a genuine interest in geopolitics. My father was in World War II and in Germany and overran a concentration camp and liberated among a few hundred people. And so I was brought up, you know, with that understanding. And in fact, not to veer too far off the track here, but I remember when I was really, really young, I have all older brothers, and I was really, really young, and my parents were talking about the Iron Curtain. And then I would look in these Time magazines, and I would see like that's things like that repeated. And I was like, what the heck is the Iron Curtain? Like I couldn't, as a kid, I couldn't really wrap my head around. Like my mother probably, or my father told me it was like a wall that was around Europe. Like Europe, I just like, these are such big ideas for like, you know, when you're 6 years old. But I was just really curious. So those things, and my father being, you know, sort of having gone through something monumental in life, I think that was a great education as well. Yeah. So with that, I try to focus in on all of these things, of course, on every piece that you do. You have to ask these questions and inform, and you may want to answer these questions, inform, compare, change, organize, relationship, find all those things. I do want to say, Randy has said this because Randy comes to my class at NYU every semester. And And I remember him talking about a data visualization. So I just did a quick diagram, and I did it for you guys, honestly. And I just wanted to exploit that idea. So each chart is a data visualization. And, it's really confusing when people say data visualization. Do they mean infographic? What do they mean? And in fact, there's many data visualizations within an informational graphic, within an infographic. These buzzwords, but it's sort of like Tableau being used out there, right? So every company wants Tableau. Every company wants data visualization. But what is it that they want? Do they want a dashboard? So good to clarify. Hopefully,
Yeah, I hear it a lot the other way. I hear it a lot that people
Okay.
say they want an infographic,
Yeah.
but what they mean is a data visualization.
There you go. Right. So
They're not thinking some big thing. They're just thinking, I just want a really well designed data visualization. They call it an infographic.
But that came from you. You actually brought
Yeah.
that. And I was like, to me, it was like the Iron Curtain, like visualizing. What does he mean? Right. So anyway, better to get it out there. So you heard it here first. I actually did this for you guys too. Infographology. I just made it up. But really what this is something we're trying to do with the conference board is we're trying to lift out insights, high level insights into an informational graphic so that people don't have to get too bogged down in, 50-page report or 120-page report or 160-page, PowerPoint, that sort of thing. So we're trying to, get everyone to understand what we're trying to lift out of it. It helps to educate that circle of people around you, whether they be researchers, economists, journalists. So everybody knows what we're going for. So I just wanted to bring this up because this is how I work, like the FBI. I hurry up to slow it down. That's the way I work. So I hurry up to get everybody's hand in on it and get everybody's, want list. And then I slow it down to find the story within the data. So this is just an example of this ecosystem, one of the ecosystems that I'm talking about tonight. And I'm just using this piece as an example. And it's a piece I did for the conference board on how much the debt has, gone up since COVID. And so although you may only see one piece, on the website, in the background, you have to think about how you make it for all of these other assets so that you don't have to rebuild and revisit this stuff too much. I try to do it all in one shot. Everything is done at the same time and right down to the social media. And of course, our logo would go onto the social media, each piece, but I break it out into animation and work with, someone that does just a fantastic job at it. I got a good example.
Really eye-opening for a lot of clients and a lot of companies too, that once you've done the design, there's so much more they can do with it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, so we're trying to get as much traction as possible. So we'll send it out in an email, and then I have to make another asset just for the website, for the carousel, which you click on, then would take you to the main image. And so, yeah, there's a lot of work, behind these, of course. Excuse me. Navigation. I just want to talk a little bit about this because in my class, I try to cultivate everyone on the idea that we're trying to give people direction, really good instructions. Leading somebody into like the great masters that I was pointing out earlier, getting and controlling their eyeball. So when you're driving 65 miles per hour, you want to know, like, you got to have good markers. And that means like a legend and a chart, right? You don't want people to get lost and try to figure out, right? You got to figure this out for them. And once you get that science down, that trifecta I was talking about, and then it makes the stuff so much easier to do. And because information is inherently hard. So this is on like navigation still. This is just something I did for the conference board, and on sustainability, who reports. Sustainability is a very talked about topic now, right? Trying to move away from oil and making environmentally friendly buildings. So there's all these companies, they talk to one another. And at the conference board, the other thing that we do, the larger part of the organization, is bring companies together. Corporations actually talk to one another, and high level employees that guide the company, and they actually get behind doors and actually talk. I'm not involved with that, but that's the human capital and the conferences. We do conferences all over the world, and have offices all over the world. And so it's really, really fascinating place because of how many dynamics, how many channels we're in. But anyway, sustainability is talked about. So, I have to take something and make heads or tails out of it and isolate the what countries report and what countries don't. I'm not sure how I actually get there. I've broken down a piece in I'll show you in a couple minutes. It's just sort of intuitive at this point where I start to move stuff around and try to work like the FBI, or I have to slow it down so that I can understand it. And these are just essentially bar charts, but I just try to make something, more engaging and easy for people to look at, see who's reporting, who's not. This is what we typically get, right? As a project, this is what you got to do. You got to make something out of this. So I use my trifecta. Understand the information, what's the message you want to say, who's the audience. In this case, this is, should I buy points or take higher interest rate? This was for an online calculator that I had to make something out of this. This is just awful to look at. So I want, my audience is 18 to 92. I want, a very broad audience to really know what to do. So this is what you can turn it into. And these are just, metrics to start with, but based on $100,000 house at an interest rate, and you move that, gear up or down, and then it tells you how many points and then how many years it takes off, so should you be, trying to pay off the points or take a higher interest rate. So lots of folks here probably sort of know about that, but, or in the, early stages of buying a house, or at some point you will, or an apartment or a condo. So it's just an online calculator, but this is so much more intuitive. Let this roll for a second.
Talk to me honestly.
So a couple of years ago, I was listening to NPR radio here in New York, and Kai Ryssdal was saying the magic that he does is tells what's inside the black box. And I was like, you know what? That's what we do. That's what we do for data visualization, as an analyst, data analyst. That's what we sort of do is, tell, the story. And so I happen to be working on something at the same time as the Orion Mission to Mars project. And I was working on something for MasterCard, and I named it the Orion Mission series. And it was to do these dashboards. I was just doing examples of taking maybe 3-5 points of information, and how could I push those and make them really, really cutting edge and edgy, really, modern. So this was just an exploration, and I call this the Orion series of graphics. And it's just a basis. These were templates. But then I actually encountered while I was there, a project where I could employ that idea. And while it's not based in yellow, it was based on the new MasterCard branding colors, or so I thought at the time. So it's got all of the information in there in regard to visitor spend. So MasterCard was trying to measure the metrics and tell a story about each country that they do business in, and the amount of money people spend. So I developed this template, and this is just a quick lap around the world and show you different places and how I was able to just move these shapes and containers around and build something that was more engaging, more intuitive, and then of course an online web-based version of that, and just triggers a little more intrigue. But I have to build it both ways. So I always have to have certain components in here, but don't want to give people too much information. But so
To that, Ray?
what's that?
Go back one to the web version of the visualization. Did you work with a web development team to make that animated and interactive on the website?
They did that, yes, on their end, yes, an engineer.
So they took your design and
Yes.
then coded it to make it interactive or make it.
That's right.
Was it interactive or was it just animated?
No, this is just animated.
Okay.
Yeah, so that would be another level of coding, and so it just depends on where you are, right? We have back office where we are that they do the data engineers will do that. So it does take a team of people. So I only have a limited amount of capacity, but yeah. So but this one was done just for the presentation purposes.
Yeah, and I've worked with clients that, even if we had the ability, they didn't want us, touching their website whatsoever, right?
Right.
So they still wanted their team to be the one to do any coding that was going to go on the website.
Well, I'll tell you that both Bloomberg and MasterCard have waves of engineers. It's
Mhm.
like, that's the bulk.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah, I would be the anomaly, right? In those organizations, really technologically advanced. But
While you're still on that, how much detail did you give them? Did they just have the end result, or it wasn't just a sketch? I mean, it was your fully designed Illustrator design.
Oh yeah, based off of my template, and then I supplied
Mhm.
SVGs, right? You supply
Yep.
component SVGs for them. That's how you do that. So we're starting to do that at work now. We're going to do a little experimenting, and yeah, so that's what you'd work off of. It wouldn't be PNGs or JPEGs. It would be SVG
Right.
components. Each piece is a different.
Always try to work in vector.
Yeah. So data visualization, visualize the data. I did not do this piece, but I think this really illustrates that point. This is just a really innovative way, right? So it doesn't have to be, I'm an illustrator by trade, right? So everything, but I'm, designer too. So these are great ways. I've done a lot of stuff at Business Week. I used to do actually claymation and data visualization and claymation, and then take pictures of it and everything and make it for businessweek.com. But so there's just so many ways, and I guess in my class I encourage people to be out of the box thinking. It doesn't have to be straight away. But this is a piece I did back at Business Week, and just showing this is a more illustrative approach, but just show that in all those numbers. Show that dynamic and cultural, right? Different, like either through color or size, just to give that dynamic and really exploit those numbers. And of course, we're tasked with finding the story in the data. Oh yes, so a few years ago, when Edward Snowden came into all of our lives with metadata, I had got a call from the CIA to do a project for special forces somewhere down in the Virginia area. And while I've taken out all the really, really critical information here, because of course I couldn't put it in there, they wanted just an updatable container that they could use every week, rather than in a meeting of like 50 people or whatever, rather than to look at a journal and go through a report, 50-page report. They just wanted something that they could update and look at quickly. So I've replaced all that critical information with famous artists, but you can see how it was built. Again, I did not do the engineering in the background, but I designed it so that it was easily updatable every week so that they could see where terrorism was coming in from all around the world. So, but I've just replaced it with famous artists. Which brings me to Randy's book. And this is where, that's the story behind his cover, actually. So I really took out all the information, and we happened to be doing, a project, and he had asked me, like, do you have anything, that might work in this case? And so that's the story behind
Yeah, that was great.
That's quite a story behind that book, right? Oh my God.
Yeah, that's quite a story. And there is a question real quick about what app you used to create that.
I actually designed it in Adobe Illustrator.
That's what I would assume. It was Illustrator.
Yeah, I work in Adobe and a few other things, light things. Just now I'm just starting to play around with Adobe Animate. I think that that's going to be a useful tool for me to make. I'll show you in a moment. My pieces that I do all in one blast, that whole ecosystem. And then if I can just control the animation, that would be good. So I'm the one breaking it up and thinking it through. So, so I think it's up in here. So I have a couple of case studies. This is from MasterCard, and the goal here, this is how we get information, right? You make something out of this, make something visual out of this. It's got numbers and stats in it. But the moral of this, they're trying to show when MasterCard got into the digital payment space. That was the idea. And it's a timeline. So like, how can you make this fit into like something manageable or anything? So, so they have some new brand styles. I had recorded it actually. So you can see this sort of on the build, like how you can take this information that really stretches way out there and start to work with it. Just thought this would be helpful to see. And this is just Adobe Illustrator. See the evolutionary process take place here.
Do you have any feel for how much time this spans for this time lapse?
Oh, yeah, this is just a little while. There was just a few minutes that I sort of started. I've been down this road before with a timeline, so I sort of knew how to organize it. But then, so yeah, you have to look at it, and I think initially those things are really scary to look at, right? Those things like, oh, what am I gonna do with this? There's lots of editorial redundancies in here too. So I actually edited that down. And so then just to show the evolution, okay, so now I got it down. What I did was I stacked it in decades. That's the key, right? So that helps you eliminate and just build channels. So I started then grouping like this area where they started getting into the digital space and using, like, this is one of their new brand color. So I'm just sticking with that, and the use of circles and brand color. I don't like to use too many colors in anything that I do. I think that it's a better place to start out with grays and work your way up rather than to work with like color that comes out of an Excel. Just way crazy, too many colors. So you can see the decades stacked up, and you can see now clustered. You see I'm using these circles that mean something for MasterCard, right? It's very meaningful because of their logo and their branding. And then I just start to apply different values and colors and simple until I get to something like this, where now I'm like those working with the technology of the great masters that I had showed you, the painters, right? I want to control your eyeball to go there. And I use inflection of type to to just make that more important, right? The use of type, whether it be size or bold. So that's where they want to get into the digital space. So what do? I go to Google and digital, and I come up with something like this. So then I'm like, how can I fit that in? So this is a little bit more labor intensive, but I made these, and I sort of think people get it digital. So the goal, that's the end piece, is to make it so state the obvious without being over obvious. That's when MasterCard got into the digital payments. This is another piece that I did. I think it actually just came out this week for solutions briefs. So this is for the Center for Economic Development, which is everybody's from the White House. And I worked with this guy for a few years. He just retired 2 weeks ago. His name is Joe Minerick, and he and Bill Clinton were the people who balanced our debt in 2000. And he was just a wonderful guy to work with. But of course, he had a long career, being in the White House for 8 years, and then doing some other things, working for us. And now I think he races a Porsche for fun. But yeah, for real, he really does. He really does. I swear to God, he really does. But anyway, so he did this piece on the way out, and I tried to make it really, really special for him. And it's dealing with the fiscal debt, because everybody sort of knows, like, it's getting to be a lot, out of control. So this is what it gives me, right? Or it gives me, a more developed chart. But so we got to make something out of this. Think about the story behind this. Is that it's about where the deficit is. So what kind of pictures can you put with that, right? So this is just out of Excel, right? So he plotted this, and so this is what I'm looking at. So what can I do with this? And so I was thinking, I'll go right to what it ended up being. That's the Japanese tsunami wave suggestion. And there's a tsunami about to hit us in the future, because we can't really keep up borrowing money forever. So I'm gonna pause on the next slide, and I'll just let you guys look at this, and I'll ask you if you can put into the chat, send it, and Randy will catch it. Put into the chat what the takeaway, what is driving this. If you can tell, if you want to put that in the chat, that would be great. Yeah, what is the takeaway on that piece? Let me just go back to that. If you think you got an idea, so then that tells me whether it would be successful or not, right? If you get the meaning of what is the takeaway on that. Anyway, Randy, you let me know.
Yeah, keep going, because I know you're going to get back to it.
Yeah. So yeah, okay. So just make sure it's out to everyone, and then Bax and Randy will be able to catch it.
Yep. So in the chat, make sure you switch your two, because a couple people I see sent it to hosts and panelists. Make sure you post it to everyone.
Right here. Yeah. So I think I can keep going a little bit. I'll just give it one more minute. So what would be the takeaway on that piece? What's driving that? And
They get it.
What's that?
They get it. I'm watching the chat. They get it.
I'll break it down a little bit. So how I, bring it into from that Excel document to make it easy. Make it easy for people to read your, data visualizations, your charts. Whether you be a data scientist or a designer or even working in Tableau, but you got to make this stuff easy for people to navigate. It goes back to navigation, right? That section. I just want people to go right here and be able to, I don't want to put physically the names and the numbers too far apart, quite literally. And then you want to be able to tell, this is percentage breakdown. You don't want them to be wondering. Bring attention to what we're comparing against. So all of this expenditure has got to be paid for with revenues, right? Taxes. And that's pretty steady all the way over to 18.5, right? So watch this. This is going from 2022 up to 2050. So it's all, projected, but nonetheless, be very, very explicit and tell people what these layers of sediment, which is really, it's the ocean, but for conversation's sake, tell them what these sections are, in very clear language. Actually, Joe didn't write much of this. I actually wrote it in along with a couple of typos, and that I'll get corrected, but nonetheless. And then I search the story in the data, right? The story is the tsunami that's going to hit us out into the next 20 to 50 years, right? How are we going to pay for it? So I look for empathy in a story. And this is the fun part, right? So, I'm an illustrator, so, the stuff is fun to do, but it's part of the story. I love public policy and economics from, I guess, working at Business Week and really starting to grasp it. And that took a long time, right? Surrounded by journalists and economists and researchers who always had stories, really, really interesting stuff. So here we are. Randy, anything in the chat?
There's a bunch in the chat.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Interest. Revenues are less than expenditures. Interest. We should increase taxes. Interest.
Right.
Overspending will have a catastrophic effect,
Yeah. So there it is. Right. So I just want to make sure that came across is that, so those layers of sediment or the ocean, right? Those don't really change that much. But what is really driving this is pay off your debt, right? Pay off your interest. The interest is going to kill us. It's like your credit cards. Pay off your credit cards. You don't see it. It seems like, nominal amount of money with your credit card, your own personal. So, if the government ran the government the way that we have to run our lives, our own personal lives, things would be a hell of a lot different, Anyway, so yeah. So this is another report on renewable energy, right? This is in the same bucket as sustainable. And the guy I work with here is just plots very beautiful charts, very clean, very nice. But on their own, it's sort of hard to wrap your head around it. Like they felt like they could be pulled together. And then of course, this is like, a few pages, right? How can we get this down to more of like a one page, right? So we want to put this on the website. Somebody can scroll a little bit and see, and then be able to print out a PDF and sit around the table. You want them to walk away with a physical copy of this in this case. Not all the time, but in this case. This is pretty long. So this is what you usually get that comes, in the way of sort of a short report. So I turned it into this just a few days ago, I guess coming into last week and the beginning of this week. So I merged that information in here. Let me zoom in so I can show you what I did through very simple color coding, right? Connect this and tell about it. And why it matters, right? Why does it matter, right? I thought that in the original text was like small type. And so I add inflection on that because I want to know the takeaway. I want to get to that or tell somebody, how to get to that. So sustainability, renewables. So I merged a couple of charts here together just to make it, I think, a lot more intuitive and easy to look at. And used our new color brand style colors and then, yeah, just, not everything has to be illustrated, but just be really elegant and simple and connected, easy. And this was well edited. Yeah, so I work with a couple of, really good editors, Sarah and Stephanie. And yeah, so this is another piece I thought would be really, really important to show, because I find that legends are the key to charts, right? If you don't have a good legend, you lose somebody. So, I try to be innovative when I need to. Now, there's a lot of information in this. This was a very difficult piece to do. And so there's some leadership skills. And so what I did was I built in redundancies like strategic here. And so this is the strategic quadrant. And then within that, I used, this gradient color to show the least to the most. Very difficult piece, but I tried to make it, much easier to look at. But legends are totally key to really, really good information design. Yeah, so this was hard. Took a while. This is a piece for the Center for Economic Development. This is the White House crew. And just to show you what we did here on innovation, right? So China is really outspending us. And so it's scary because, what we used to do back in 1995, I tried to, there were all the numbers, there are all the decades and everything in between here, or whatever, all the years. And so you don't need that, just simplify everything. Just simplify to the simple, tell people what they really need to know, the beginning and the end, and they can see the line going down. So I sort of search for these ideas of like innovation and a light bulb, and then I look at the fever line or the bar charts and I see, how does that fit? And to what symbol does that fit? And I just want to show, this is the final part where you would have a little bit of animation going on, right? Just helps it. This is out into LinkedIn. This is just gravy at the end. And again, this can all be done in Adobe Animate. One of the people I've worked with uses 3 different programs. He's real hard to follow how he does it, but anyway, nonetheless, these are fun. I really like to do, and I think it's more engaging for people when they see information embedded in a concept where you find the empathy in the story. Here again, same thing. Like the economy is slowing down. It's not slowing down now. It was slowing down. We do this every year. I think I updated the same piece this past year, but I want to show that empathy is really important, right? Like, so I Google, like slow symbol, slow icon, right? And I see what comes up. And so then it gives me this information. And then you can this is the fun part, right? And then you build in maps. Maps are so important to information design. It's sort of where I started working for, for the Gannett organization, is you had to do maps. And so that is probably the basis of what we know of data visualization. Certainly for me, it was. And anyway, I didn't complicate this. This is bar charts, and then show each country, real simple. And you can see, we have the same very, very simple branding colors, which I love, you know. Color would not make this any more important if each one of these was a different color. You know, it's how you use, you know, just a very narrow band of color. Yep, so this is the piece on the pandemic, the debt that the pandemic has built onto our already existing debt. So how I found this was just shopping around for ideas. I'm looking at these lines and I'm Googling objects. I use Google, of course, like a thesaurus, right? When I'm developing stuff. And this is the long view of it, right? We wanted to add 2 charts, but when it was out there in social media land and on our website, it was just this. And then you could download that, you know, more of that report story as a printable 8.5 by 11. So I try to make it for that whole ecosystem, actually. So the pandemic debt is just so, and I kept those colors, like, you know, this is where I used color as, you know, it's hot, it's dangerous, you know, and then that kind of debt is dangerous. I think, yeah, this was on the infrastructure bill. So, you know, I sort of look around for those ideas and use, you know, the I-beam, you know, and lift, and to show the metrics, you know, fun how this can be done. And this was animated more for LinkedIn. I just let that roll one more time. Yeah, so this is, you know, the infrastructure bill that was passed. So we're going to fund infrastructure in the future. This is another piece that is, that was for the Center for Economic Development. So this was just to celebrate Women's Day a couple of years ago, but also to point out that women need to have a seat at the board table. See if the animation rolls. There we go. Yeah. So this is just a continuation. You know, there was a lot of charts here, and rather than do it, you know, vertically, I did it in this passing from slide to slide to point out, you know, the deficiencies in the system, really, why women aren't, you know, more sitting at the board table. International Women's Day, I think that's what it was for. Yeah. So as translators, it's not always data, right? So it's nice to veer off and to do other conceptual based things. So this is a piece that I did for MasterCard for the UN, because they work together to facilitate debit cards for refugees in war-torn regions all over the world. So, so they had this project. I just thought it was conceptually be good to show you, because these things can be built into informational graphics, but on its own, this was more illustrative design. So they're trying to say that they distribute these cards because cash is corrupt. So they distribute debit cards. And so they wanted to say urban, and I use the skeleton of the UN, right? And they're just real simple color branding, and use that sort of skeleton to say urban, peri-urban, or suburban, and rural. So they just wanted to show where they distribute those cards. There was also some information design that went, informational graphics that went with this, but I just thought this was interesting to show how you can start to think about not just data, but information. Organizing, I think this is a piece I actually did for you, Randy. And so once you know, get your hierarchy and develop, you know, your information, you can stack it. This was, I think, shareable in a mobile environment, but it sure showed hierarchy and organization, and that we put all the most important points of this product up at the top, and then we wanted to show cause and effect. This is like the UN graphic I just showed you. So cause and effect is, so you can see the yin and the yang, right? So I fit that into like the stomach area, what causes it, and how it can be treated. And so I think this is for a web browser as well. And yeah, there you go. So yeah, that was for you, Randy. Here's another pieces that I did for MasterCard. And I want to just, I think it was really important to show you because, well, I used their branding, as you can see, right? I didn't give you any chance to veer off as far as branding. And then when it comes to the information, I really pared it down. So they're talking about millennials. And so I try to use a lot of reinforcing buckets to reinforce the idea of millennials were born between 1979 and 1976. They're 20 to 37, and they are 24% of the population, and they equal 76.7 million out of 319 million. And I think by doing it this way, you really start to reinforce what part of the population they are. And real simple, easy for people to, you don't give them a chance to get lost in your graphic. And these are basically bar charts, but proportionally correct. And then simple things like this, iconography, I do on my own. And, in this case, like millennials believe sometime in their life they'll be rich, and they want to be rich, or they should be rich. And so I'm just looking for visual language that says bling in this case. Fun, but anyway, yeah. So how to take out all the clutter that is in, you can see in these case studies that I showed you, right? There's tons of clutter. When you watch, any sort of programming now or wherever you look, it's like, there's just like too much information, right? And so, watch cable TV, it's got like 5 different things totally unrelated, all going on at the same time. And he's talking about a different subject. It's just incredible. Hard to keep up with, information overload. So this section is about visual design and designing a visual system into it. So this is sort of an interesting thing to show because, it's something everybody can sort of relate to, jeans and Levi's. So it's a little story I just thought I'd walk through. And I get a call from Levi's a few years back. And so they wanted to do a market behavior study, right? So that included a lot of charts. So a market behavior study, right? So like going to New York City, I live in downtown White Plains. I live in Westchester County, New York, just north of New York City. So I go into New York City and I go talk to them. Oh my God, they got like so much information. And of course, researchers, naturally feel everything that they have is important. So you have to, show everything and every number. And it's just not that way, right? You can't do that. You got to be your own best editor, actually. But also you got to impress that on the team that you work with. So just how I did this was I started looking at all of these, data that they have started organizing it. And I was like, I got to make friends with the data scientists. And I know there's a bunch of them in the room here. Yeah, because you want to make friends with them because they want, in this case, I needed them to organize the Excel spreadsheets so that I could manage it and make heads or tails out of it. So then the next thing I do is I go look for ideas, concepts. And then how I do that is I go to Google and use it as a thesaurus. And I Google pictures and words and pictures. And I take everything that I came up with and I distill that down to some sort of ideas, and I connect the dots and I plot the charts. Boom, I got an idea. Run a visual thread through this whole piece. Now, given we're working with Levi's, a thread is sort of like a natural element in it, but I was thinking, gee, if I run a thread through this whole project, because I got hundreds of charts, if I run a thread and I move my content up from the bottom and a legend in from the top, it looks something like this. And I could run it and I could hang anything on that. I could put any kind of a chart on that, pie chart, bar chart. So, and then I built myself a legend at the top, and that just coordinated with all the data, you know, and I'm conventional. That's the type of jeans that I wear, as I found out. And so the type of people, what type of jeans they wear. So that's it. And I use that color key theme through the whole project. And I could basically drop anything on that line. I could put a pie chart, doesn't even matter. Once you develop it, it's just this easy, nice thread that ran through the whole project, even a table. And I even broke that down into the color, used my, you know, my color legend up at the top. And so I needed to make the cover. So how do I do that? A market behavior study. I go to Google behavior, come up with the Rorschach test. That's the ink spot, right? That's the ink spot. So how does that relate, right? But a behavior, right? How do people behave? What kind of jeans do they buy? So I was like, yeah, that combined with the jeans, boom, I got another idea. Watch this. Market behavior study, right? What kind of people wear what kind of jeans? That's what it was. So then that thread ran all the way through it, and all I had to do is plot charts, and I hung it on it. And then I broke this out to push out to Twitter and LinkedIn and such. So just that's the process. Made for mobile. It's incredibly important, right? That's how we read. This is what we do. This is how we read most of our information now. That's how I read all the time. You know, I don't really get magazines anymore. I read on my phone. And I worked for magazines my whole life, but this is what I designed for now. And why do I do that? Because this is where all the tractions, this is where the activity's at. I mean, you know how important this is, right? But there's also problems. So it's like the inception of the printing press. It's called social disruption. It's happening now. And, you know, someday we'll get a handle on it. But, you know, when the printing press came in, we had the same social problems, and, you know, it's difficult. But nonetheless, designing for this environment, I'm just trying to show you this ecosystem. If you can take, and in advance of a project, if you can take and section it down, you can re-platform this out into multi-platform your projects without handling them or having to redo things. You don't want to have to do that. I mean, there's just not enough time in a day to do it. So I try to design for all of these environments when I'm, you know, doing content, and mobile device, PDF, just scrollable, web browser, that's where it started. But then I want to break it off into social media, and you can pump, you know, each one of those out, you know, like every day, and make a real series out of it. Right down into presentations, well, whether it be Google Slides or PowerPoint, doesn't matter, break it out, and then right down into a printout, and you can stack it. So I diagram this so that people could, you know, the teams that I work with can understand. And here is, you know, several of them where it's been sectioned out, and portions of this were broken out into whether it be social media or whatnot. And then, you know, built really from a mobile environment, and can go on a web browser, of course, too. So here's how it breaks down, and breaking in each section. These could be, you know, more elaborate charts, but, you know, this is display type is fine too, or, you know, as long as it's interconnected and it's got sort of the same color and theme riding through it, you could push these out individually onto LinkedIn and whatnot. and then coming up to the end, and this is how it looks in action.
What's the name? What's the name? What's the name? What's the name?
That's it.
Right. Fantastic, Ray. Thank you.
Yeah. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. I think Brandon's
Yep, I will. I'll throw your LinkedIn link in the chat.
I hope that-
And we have a ton of questions. We have a ton of really good questions too.
Absolutely.
And so I know you haven't been paying attention to any of that stuff. So let me moderate some of
I'm
these.
honored that you guys hung in there. Like, I hope
Yeah, we got 120 people still here, and we were up close to 200 at one point. So we're still got some great feedback here.
all the way from Vancouver. Oh my God. And New Zealand. Oh my God. Thank you. Honored.
All right, so let's try a couple. Mike asks, and I think this was back when you were talking about knowing your audience.
Yeah.
Can you give an example of a visualization which worked for one audience, but then really just, he said, totally failed for another audience that just sort of flopped with a different group?
Yeah, right. I mean, so I do a lot of stuff for an economic audience, people that are watching, the economy. And so, the same kind of visuals are not going to work for a sports audience. There you go.
But you're assuming they have a certain amount of pre-existing either knowledge or understanding.
Well, they're going to be looking for, data related or visuals, something that's, intuitive based around their world, so they know something about it. I think that the world of sports is all statistics. It's incredible. And I got to tell you, it is the hardest. I run. If I ever get asked to do a project like that, I run. No, I would do it, of course, but I shy away from it because it's really hard. It's not like you just wrote football or soccer. I mean, you can, right? There's things, right, that will work with that audience, and that is not going to work with a trader sitting in New Zealand. I mean, Vancouver is, or DC or wherever they are. It's just they're really different. So it's just think of the people, your friends, the world around you. I mean, they're a diverse group of people, and when you talk to them, if there's somebody who is a cook, you talk to them about what they cook, or how the business is, as opposed to somebody who's a mechanic. And I have all sorts of friends, and so I just think about all of those audiences when I do something in advance, right? I just sort of know that's a very defined audience. But sometimes you do stuff, like the world of B2B, that's a very specific audience, right? So
That's very different than communicating with the public.
Yeah. So they're really, it's tough when it's that broad. It's, hopefully that.
Lee asks, Lee, when a project starts, what are the two most important questions you ask? Is he leading you to something?
I was just thinking of something funny, like how much you're going to pay me and when you work. How's that? That's my answer.
Okay. Faith asked, and
I asked them, of course, when do you want it, and how much of it can be pared down. Just like all those outer perimeter things that are going to be essential to, like, how much time do I have to solve it? That's what I want to know, because I work like the FBI. Hurry up, slow it down. Yeah, they got to understand what I'm doing, or else a lot of people, listen, a lot of people, myself in the early years, you end up doing stuff that you really don't understand. But you're doing charts that you really don't understand what the meaning of them are. And it helps to really, truly understand it.
Related question. When you get on a project and they give you data, do they already know? Have they already done the analysis for you, or are they asking you to do the analysis? And so if they've done the analysis, are you just doing design, or are you doing both, helping them walk through the analysis and then doing the design?
Right. So I can do some analysis, but I'm not a data analyst or a data scientist. And I don't want to pretend that I am. And so I work with some real interesting researcher economists now, and they're very specific. And I do not want to tinker with, what they do or how they should. It's sort of a yin and yang thing, right? Where you have to, I want to make that banana. I want to exploit the idea. I want to find the story and the data for them and pull that out. So I design metrics, but I'm not a data scientist. So I do charts, of course, but I work with people that are brilliant with this stuff. And so, like Joe Menerick, okay, he balanced the debt for our country. He's the chief economist for our country. He gave me that chart. Okay, so this is what the picture looks like for the next 50 years. I can't improve upon that. But I can tell the story.
Okay, and this came up a couple times, so I'm going to sort of consolidate a couple questions here about color, because based on which example you were showing at the time, color questions came up about, how you choose your colors and your use of minimal colors.
Yeah.
And another question was about, you tend to like to stay in one color family and use shading instead of trying to use multiple colors for the different data series, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So just it's sort of a general, what's your philosophy in using color? You want to talk some more about that?
Great question. So color is not going to solve problems. So if you've ever worked in Excel or Tableau, you'll see that it uses, if there's 6 different lines, it gives you 6 different colors, and you don't really need that, right? It's too much information. Like it's looking at a road sign going 65 miles per hour, and you have different types of information on it, right? They keep it simple for a reason, is because you're driving and you need to make that exit. So I try to keep it simple for a reason, because color is going to be more of a diversion than it will embrace you and bring you into it. So I keep it really simple, but I start with the brand colors, by the way. So brand colors is where you want to start. And then with that, you don't have to use all of it. I'm working on that because we're doing a redesign for the website, the conference board now. And I'm working with those palettes and there's chosen colors. And so because I have them, I'm not going to use them. Because Excel plots something with that many colors, it's just too much. It's too hard to look at. So my analogy is the throughway and the exit. And you got to keep it real simple for people. And I think, yeah.
Okay. Related to that, Sean was asking about what consideration should be a priority with regard to accessibility when you're designing a DataViz. Because I know color is a piece of that, but it's not, accessibility goes way beyond color as well.
Like what, for example? Like, give me an example. Just because I'm overtired at work all day. I'm just being honest.
I don't even know if Sean's still here, but considerations for accessibility might be, high vis for your text so that it's easy to read,
Yeah,
large text, minimal text. You don't have, you don't put it on top of grid lines underneath it to make it hard to read. You put it in a clear white space. You want to use colors that, especially for color blindness considerations or color
I'm just going to
deficiency
say
considerations.
that I
Right.
consider. That I consider. So I used to work with somebody who was colorblind, and that was a blessing. Honestly, it was terrific to work with because I don't think it's sort of like sign language, right? Data visualization is like sign language, and you want to be able to make sure that you can communicate. And if you don't know that, and if I worked with somebody, and I wouldn't call it a handicap in his case, it was a
Mhm.
benefit. And so he taught me about creating enough variation between color so that it's dynamic enough. Just because it's more monochromatic,
Yep.
um, too much color just it will it hinders you, and so it makes it less accessible. So I keep it pretty narrow, and I think that's where you should start and build up. Very, very simple gray. Because there's a saying in the world of art is, if it works in black and white, it'll work in color. But the reverse is not true.
Do you always start in black and white so that you know it completely works in black and white before you add color?
Black and white and gray.
Okay.
Yeah, gray. Yeah, gray. Yeah, I work in that spectrum first because I want it to be a layered piece of that data visualization is information. And so not all of it's important. Remember the TV cable news guy, right? Not everything is that important, really.
Right. And AW in the chat, he's completely correct that if you design for accessibility, it makes it even easier for people who don't have those considerations.
Yep.
Okay, Alexandra asks a good question because you like to add the illustrator in you adds that visual empathy, that visual element.
Yeah.
How do you decide whether a visual element is worth adding? Because there's some trade-off between
Yeah.
increasing engagement and relating to your,
Yeah.
I'm adding my own words here, and relating to your audience versus the risk of adding too much clutter and adding too much noise to the page.
Cool question. Really cool question. What is that? It's a tightrope, that you walk, and it's just at this point, I'm not sure. Like, I'm sure there was a time in my career earlier. I'm a little gray. Okay, got a little bit of history, but I'm sure there was a time where somebody either told me, "Yeah, I know." When I was a lad, they told me, "Yeah, this has got to have a picture with it, and this doesn't." And so now I am my own best editor. I really, really adamant about that now, and that I know what that threshold is because I've been working this channel for a long time. And I'm not sure that answers her question, but how do I know? It's a sense of, I guess, after some time, because I think we're all in a position at one time or another where somebody's going to tell you whether this should have an illustrative nature to it or not, and what's too much, right? You see the wave, the tsunami wave. That was, just the words. I read the words, and does it evoke something, and does that take on the form of something valuable like a light bulb, which a broken light bulb innovation, right? We're not investing in it the way we should be. I don't know. This is all like.
And it looks at least of the examples that you showed, your choice, I think, has generally been show one visual element or not.
Yeah.
Right. So it's show the wave, show the snail, show the light bulb, show that one thing to sort of draw attention to sort of a visual metaphor of the conclusion you're trying to draw people to, or you don't. but it's not like you're going to put 3 or 4 visual elements on there, right? It's either one that's going to tie it together or not, and it's all about the data.
So, I have been an editorial illustrator my whole life, and I used to do op-ed for New York Times, the Washington Post. And so, after a while, you sort of, get the idea of what, how much needs to be in there and what's too much. I'm going to share my page, just like to share real quickly. So I did this cover, and this is like IBM. They told me they want to make it, they're innovating at the time. And so they're doing, like turning the company on its side at the time. And so I did these with Jackson Pollock style in the basement with paint, and then I brought him in. And so I don't know, like you
That's
just
great.
no, really. And then we photographed that, and then that's not a real canvas behind it. We put that in digitally. So then IBM called me and wanted to buy the original, and I was like, oh my God, I got nothing. It's like, part of it came out of like real paintings, and part of it came out of a digital world. But anyway, so I've been illustrating, and the only thing I've ever done since, or wanted to be since I was 5 or 6, was an artist. So I don't know. That's a road like you go down and you take a chance. Like
Yep.
how much is too much illustration? You flop. There's a lot of flops over the years too.
Yep. Mark in the chat is right. He's saying then you could have sold that as an NFT now if you'd made
Yeah.
that today.
Yeah, you could still buy it with Bitcoins.
That's right. Here's my Bitcoin wallet. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Cheyenne asks, and you started to talk about this a little bit. How do you factor in portability? For example, DataViz access versus browsers versus mobile versus in an app. Do you design one that goes everywhere, or when you start a project, is there one primary target?
One primary. And so that in these days would be the website. And there's a box that's got to be there. And then they want to sometimes add more. They have researchers, economists, they have more data. That's where it gets to be a little bit bigger, but that's like an alternative universe where you can click on something and then you can download it. Or do we make it scrollable on the website? So all of these things are possible, but it's working with the technology, the organization, right, that you're working for. It's, how can you fit what you're doing? But the main thing is like, you can't have too much data in there. Got to be willing to, people got to add it. Like this guy that I did, the very sort of elegant on renewable energy. Him and I, like sort of shoulder to shoulder, work through. He talks through it, and I'm like move stuff around, and that is an ultimate way to work. Is that you got him right there? It's not back and forth. I'll call you this. It's like, here, I'm going to move pictures around, and you talk it through it. I'm going to stop them every now and then. Like, that's way too much time. You're like, here, let me show you the redundancies. How many times you said renewables, or percent, or just like they just have to point that out. And then we have some really sharp editors, Sarah and Stephanie and Emily, and they're just great, and they can go in and they really do the editing, right? I'm just trying to chisel away. And I think that everybody has to do that as a data viz designer. You got to chip away at them. Know without bruising them how to chip away at not their ego, but because they think everything that they dug up is so important, they can't give it up. And I think that's, you gotta put yourself on the line, and that's very hard to do.
Do you find talking them through works that, or showing them like a simpler design is what brings them over the edge?
Well, these days, we work fast. So it's nice when I work shoulder to shoulder with somebody, so to speak. This week, I'm going to work with, or in the coming days, I'm going to work with our managing editor. She's going to be editing, and I'm going to be working with a woman, economist who's brilliant. And she is from Germany, but in Spain. And her and I they'll hang right in there with me. And so that's ideal, is to build a rapport with people. I find that great. It just helps me, and it makes my job a lot easier because you don't want to have to go back and forth too much. But I do understand being sort of young person, and then, if you're 26 and you're working with somebody who's 56 and, like a brilliant economist,
Yeah.
and, you're going to tell them what to do. It's just like at Business Week, the art director, the creative director was second to the managing editor, and that was rare. So he had the power and the knowledge to knock stuff down. So we put a stake in the ground and we got to it. And people have a problem doing that. All organizations have a problem doing that. They don't know how to move stuff out of the way so that you can put a stake in the ground and hit it, because you got to publish.
Mhm.
So we got really
You gotta-
good at that.
You gotta let it go.
Got really good at that. And then with the internet, of course, website, and then you have to work fast, I mean, I tell you, I had to do slideshows. Well, I didn't have, but I did them. I made claymation and then photographed it. I used Play-Doh, right? The color
Play-Doh.
Play-Doh. And I made illustrative data visualization. Then I'd photograph it, and then I'd bring it into Photoshop and put text and stuff, and then do a slideshow in like a day.
Mhm.
So crazy. That was a blast.
That's fun.
Oh, fun. That was great.
All right, we're just gonna do a couple more. We're not gonna be able to get to all of these. We still got a bunch more. But all right, so here's big picture. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Wear good shoes.
Wear good shoes.
Really? Yeah, that's
Hey,
right.
you heard it here first.
DataViz, right? So I have flat feet. I just, walking into Rockefeller Center every day, man, I wish I'd worn better shoes. But I don't know, data visualization, what is the best advice? Sort of be diligent, right? Really, really, I'm a doer. I build my own stuff. I do, I'm
Spray your own paint.
I'm my own. I watch out. So, I don't know specifically about data or a chart or about art, but I've only done one thing my whole life. So I'm not sure that I'm the best person to ask that to. I've only seen myself as, this is what I do. And there's no negotiating. If I got drafted, I'd be painting tanks. So
Right.
I'd make it so camo that you would not be able to find it. That sort of thing, right? So I only stay on one path and stick with it no matter what. That's what I've done. I don't know.
Okay, so Dhruv here is asking for the link to your course. So I'm going to put that in the chat.
Thank you.
Do you want to mention a couple words just about like the agenda or the kind of things you cover in the class?
Yeah, this class in particular is not like the one at Columbia. That was for the Applied Analytics Master's Program. And so that was a broad look at data visualization. NYU we've gotten it to be very specific these days. and hopefully very, very useful. It's called Data Visualization for Business. So it's yoga for your mind. That's what it is. It is a workout. So it's not about the technology. That's what I should say. It's not about, I let people, it's an open class, and I want people to be able to come to that and bring their skills. And I set up my tools so that, like, my dad was a dentist, right? So he worked with tools. And so I set up my tools so that I don't have to think about it. I want to be totally engaged with that concept. And I want people in the class to be engaged with the concept of what's at hand. And I've created a class that is a workout and gives them exposure to
That's a good point, because I end up making this point too. It's not a software class, right?
Right.
It's not a coding class. It's not a software class. It's a how do you tell data stories
But I
class.
give them free options and assets in a resource sheet of
Mhm.
Canva, the Noun project. So I don't want them to have to think too, about that. So this week was the first class, so we'll see next week, if people really, everybody really utilizes the resource sheet. So yeah, may try to make it a good experience and to get people out of their channel if they're working in a bank like JP Morgan or something, and I get somebody else from the UN. It's for graduate and above, really. And so it's people in the field working. And it's Monday evenings. Stood at that, and it's 7 weeks and
Is it in person or is it online?
online.
Okay.
I do in person, but of course COVID has changed that for now. But I have been doing this in Zoom because it's a much broader audience, get people all the way from Taiwan to New Orleans to, everywhere, Italy and wherever. Interesting bunch in the class, and they end up learning from each other, so it's a good experience.
Well, Ray, I really appreciate your time. I'm gonna cut it there because we have certainly gone over our scheduled time, and you've been very gracious
Oh, no, thank
answering
you.
more questions and sharing your stories and your work. So, thank you so much for
Yeah.
joining us tonight. For everybody here, so thank you, Ray. Thank you very much. Um, we are going to post the video, so the link to the video should show up in the meetup groups. So we'll put it in the comments for the meetup event. So whatever meetup group that you registered through, the link will post in the comments once we share that out to all the organizers and to all the groups. And then Ray, you and I can work on, if you want to make a PDF of your slides to share, we'll find a way to link that also. And I know you haven't been able to keep up because you've been talking, but I will share the transcript of the chat with you so you can skim through that if you'd like to.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
So thank you everyone, and just keep your eyeball on Meetup for our next global event. So thank you very much, and we'll say good night and shut it down.
Good night. Thanks. Buybacks. Good night. Appreciate it. What